Hi guys, hope you're doing well. This video is going to be about all the strangeness I see happening in the world right now, and it's accelerating at such an accelerated pace. That it's just like Christ said: when it comes, it'll come like a flood. I think we are clearly at the point where we are seeing the end times, in focus. I mean, I think we're at that point. I think we're clearly seeing a accelerated movement towards Christ coming for his bride, the rapture of the church, and ultimately after that, the tribulation period, and then the second coming after that, and then the millennial reign of Christ, obviously. Those are the things that we're looking for us as Christians: the rapture of the church, us going to be with the Lord. And those who aren't, the tribulation period would follow that. So these videos will hopefully be helpful for those people, but for the Christian, that's what this is directed toward. Where are we at? All the strangeness we're happening. I'm not sure what the title's going to be yet, but it's going to be something like that. All this, the crazy strangeness, the strangeness happening right now. Maybe something like that. But in any case, it's basically in essence where I see that we're at, what's going on, and where I see we're moving in the short term, maybe possibly long term. We'll see how much time we got in the video. But so we'll start where it should start with. We'll start with Israel, obviously. When you start with Israel, they are, number one, at a time economically and so forth where they're just, really having a lot of good things happening. Suddenly you have this COVID event happen. They're become an exporter of natural gas and oil. You have a lot of things happening, with them on the economic front of being leader in so many areas. They finally have somewhat element of peace around them. And then all of a sudden you have this really massive amount of instability happening throughout the world. And directly around them, you have massive instability. You have Libya to the north of them with Hezbollah there. It's faction. You have, they are on the verge, Lebanon's on the verge of economic collapse if they haven't already. The social collapse is soon to follow. Who knows what's going to happen there? You got Hezbollah, who's, always a hair trigger away from whatever Iran tells them to do as far as war could possibly break out. You have, I don't think either side wants that. Israel's in a wait and see mode to see what's going to happen with these other big players that are right next door in Syria, which Syria is a complete disaster. You have millions that have fled and gone into other nations. Millions have gone into Europe. I think it's somewhere around 5 or plus million people. Many have gone to other places, America and so forth, Canada, other places. So you have something there that is just completely wrecked. You have major players there. You have Russia. You have Turkey. You have Iran, major players in there, which perfectly fits the Gog-Magog alliance, with them both all into Libya. Libya is a disaster. Libya has become a what do we call it, civil war, with major players there in conflict with one another, not an actual hot conflict, but in conflict with one another. You have Turkey and Russia competing for the oil fields and natural resources there, obviously. You have Egypt, who's not obviously feeling comfortable in that situation, especially with Turkey expanding its tentacles and so forth, its reach into the Mediterranean, east and west, trying to basically take over much and fill the vacuum that has occurred because America is pulling out of the Middle East. And I'll address that here in a little bit. So you have that occurring. So you have Egypt threatening to go to war against Turkey and go into Libya. I don't think Egypt can win that war, and that's not against Egypt. You look at numerically, they're very comparable. Numerically, militarily, very comparable. I just don't see Egypt winning that war. I think there's some reasons why. I think there's some elements in Ezekiel kind of alludes to the destruction of Egypt and so forth, and disperse of most of their people, if not all. It's going to be, it can get really ugly for Egypt. It can be happening very quickly. That's why I think it's important to do these videos, because just everything that's happening over the weekend, and I've been watching this stuff, and everything's accelerating at such a pace that I'm going to try to stay on top of this and hopefully put out some more videos faster, just so we can stay on top as Christians. I think the end's near, and we need to be, as Christians, sharing the gospel with as many people as we possibly can, because I think the rapture occurs soon, followed by obviously the tribulation, horrible 7 years of tribulation, followed by wonderful time of the millennial reign of Christ, and obviously the age of eternity after that. So we're all looking forward to these things, but for sure for the Christian, the rapture of the church, to go to be with the Lord, and then trying to warn people who could possibly find themselves in the tribulation, where many don't realize how horrible it is because they've never taken the time to study it. But anybody who has, any Christian who has looked at it, knows it's not a joke. It's the most horrible time you can possibly think of. Majority of mankind will be lost. At least 2/3, if not more, of mankind will be killed off in that period of time. Could you imagine? If you have 7-8 billion people on the planet right now, close to 8 billion. I mean, you're talking about roughly 6 billion people dying in a 7-year period of time. The majority of people on this planet will not be alive by the time we get to the end. So it's imperative that we do share the gospel with those. Not to mention that their death is then eternal, because they would be lost. So we don't want to see that happen to anyone of any nation. We want to share the gospel with everybody. And so I'd encourage you, all my brothers and sisters out there, take every opportunity to share the gospel, even if you don't be afraid of offending. We really kind of past that point. We really need to be like, not want to be in people's face and be rude about it, but we obviously just want it in love and in charity, but we need to be out there doing it. And there's a number of ways to do it: verbally, through tracks, other things, but we need to be doing it. So just want to encourage you to do that. So you have, like I said, you got instability happening in Egypt on the brink of war with Turkey. You have instability throughout all the world in economically, with all this global thing happening, COVID thing happening globally. I mean, you have in the EU and America, you've had this retraction of their economies, that have gone. I mean, I think they reported that over the weekend it was like 40%, 40+%, and of Europe, and then you have in America, I think it was around 35, somewhere around there, percent. I mean, you're talking about massive thing. We're basically in a depression without everybody feeling it yet. America could very well be in a depression, and I'll come to those points. I think we may be there, and much of it is being driven by this craziness of COVID. I think a lot of it is driven politically, and I think many on the left have gone to this kind of crazy insanity nuclear option because they're so afraid that Trump is going to get in office. And I'm not touting Trump or anything like that. You vote for whoever you want. I don't even generally get involved in politics. It's just not where I think as Christians we need to be. We're not supposed to be part of the world, but we need to be sharing the gospel with everybody. But I am just bringing this out as factual stuff. So I think they've gone to a nuclear option. So I'll try to get to this here in a minute, what I'm talking about. But so you have, when you start looking around Israel, you've got Iraq is their monetary system is gone. I mean, I think they use dollars. I don't even think they use and euros. They don't even use their own currency. You have massive instability happening. You got protests all over the place. Protests throughout, even in Israel and everywhere. So you have social chaos like we've never seen, but it's not isolated to one country. It's everywhere. And that tells you that there is a movement in the world spiritually. It's the spiritual forces, because we know that's who we really fight against. These spiritual forces that are controlling and manipulating everything that's going around us. When you start seeing this kind of massive global instability happening, there's been a change, transformation spiritually. Satan has been given a leash, a leash to go out and do things, and he can only do what God allows, and they've been given a longer leash to go do those things. So, and we know that there's a limited amount of time he's got to act. So as we draw closer to the end times, I think this is definitely pointing to the fact that we're near the end times. Not only that, you see the hardening and coarsening of society. You see the darkness of people's minds and hearts and wickedness and the stuff that they're doing and committing. Unbelievable stuff. You see people purposely destroying people's stuff. Just the coarseness of society in general. People angry, hostile, vulgar. The vulgarity coming from people. I mean, just no fear of God and no love for humanity. I mean, that's a strong indicator where we're at spiritually, how close we are to the end times, because that's the Bible warns about that we would go to. 2 Timothy, I think it's where's it at? See if I can get there. 2 Timothy chapter 3, I believe. Yeah, 2 Timothy chapter 3. So basically 1 through 7. I won't read it for time, but if you get a chance, go through that. And it's basically just talking about how, in the last days there would be, men would be lovers of themselves, lovers of pleasure, lovers of, things like that. But, they would have a form of godliness but deny the power thereof, denying Christ. So I think we're definitely there. People have talked about this for years, but I think we're definitely there. So you have Egypt on the verge of collapse. Or a verge of war, I'm sorry. You have Turkey next door in Egypt. Egypt is in civil war. You have Russia next door. You have Russia and Egypt and Turkey in Syria on the mountains of Israel with Iran, who's got its tentacles going throughout the Middle East, causing and creating more chaos. You have Turkey now creating more chaos. There was a great article by, like I said, Israeli National News, I believe I was talking about, and they had a great article about, Turkey being this rogue nation, but there's many rogue nations out there now, but Turkey has become a massive switch, and they have basically aligned themselves in this kind of loose alliance with Russia and Iran, so that they can fill that vacuum of America pulling out, and that's what I was going to come to. So as we see Turkey trying to fill this vacuum, get more natural resources, like you see, that's why they're trying to lay claim to have an economic zone, as it were, that cut off the Mediterranean so that Israel can't run a pipeline up. I was talking about that before in a previous video, to stop that, because basically they want to get so much of that money. They sell an enormous amount of gas to Greece. Well, Greece wouldn't have to buy it from Turkey anymore. Greece has no incentive to buy it from Turkey anymore, because they're hostile with each other. They don't care for each other. And if Israel, who's now an exporter of gas, and oil, becomes a direct enemy of Turkey, not only militarily and philosophically and religiously, but also economically, it's the lifeblood of what you see happening with Turkey. And that's why they're reaching out and trying to gather all these places throughout the Mediterranean area of their region to become this major regional player. I believe that Erdogan believes he's going to, reestablish himself as the leader of the Islamic world. Even though I believe, this may sound crazy to people, I actually believe Islam is collapsing. I believe Islam is truly, theologically and everything else, is collapsing. I believe many Muslims are leaving Islam on a daily basis. I think you have a few here or there that are true followers of it or whatever. But it's changing dramatically, and people are leaving as more people are coming into contact with people who are just the internet and everything else. I think they see, like I said, all these nations that are collapsing all around them. They're all Islamic, predominantly. They all horribly run, all at war, all killing, all violent. You do that year after year after year after year after year. So it eventually takes a toll, and the reality sets in that there's a problem. And obviously truth isn't on your side when you see all these things happening, and then you see the problems in your Quran, you see the problems in the Hadith and so forth. I think Islam is collapsing. I really do. I think it's on the verge of being gone. And people may say that's crazy thinking, but I think it's real, and I think it's perfect timing for the Antichrist to come on the scene. Not only that, you look at, like I said, as we go around those nations, I mean, you're looking at alliance that's on the northern side of Israel that's basically fits perfectly in the prophetic scenario of Gog Magog. So you have this loose alliance of Russia, Turkey, Iran. They don't really trust each other. They're obviously hostile and oppose each other down in Libya. You have Libya, who's also a player in the Gog Magog alliance. So you see that this formation of these things that could fulfill this prophecy very quickly, And it says that they turn on each other as God sends this massive earthquake, and then he brings a sword against them. Who's the sword? It very well could be the United States. Obviously, Israel's going to defend itself. That's, yeah, no doubt about that. But the sword could very well be the United States. It seems most logical. How that plays out, I don't know. But I believe that sword is the United States. It's the only one that makes sense. We're allied with the United States or with Israel, or America is anyway. That their army is massive. They're the only one that can really come against a multinational force like that and really win. Not to mention, there's so many other things happening, but it's really the only nation that makes sense, unless things change. And we see things changing. I mean, talking about rogue nations, you have, like I said, you have China, who's just got tentacles everywhere, which perfectly fits the end time scenario of the kings of the East. A 200 million man army. They just so happen to have 1.3 billion people and nearly 200 million man army that they can raise. I think they boasted about that it was a year ago, something like that. But interesting, they said that number. But yeah, they've got their tentacles everywhere. They're really smart about doing it, but they're into everything economically, militarily. They built up their forces. They built up their economy. They're pushing into all areas of Asia. They're creating. They're even going into the Middle East. They're going into Africa and other places, even into Central South America. I mean, these people are everywhere. And in Canada under Trudeau, I mean, that guy, I mean, he's either paid for globalists who completely, is bought, paid for in that whole liberal spectrum of buying into their stuff, or, my goodness, he's the most brain dead person in the history of the world. I mean, did not see what China's doing. But that's just my opinion of it. I mean, my goodness, to sell out your own country for some fanciful ideal of some global utopia and allow for China to just come in and basically, wreck your country, take over, you have to be insane. And that's basically what the left was doing here in the United States under Obama and others before him, George Bush and others. But I mean, the globalists have definitely sold out, most of the world, and they have an agenda, and it's definitely happening. And that's not conspiratorial, it's just fact. You look around what these globalists are doing. They're pushing a global agenda. It perfectly fits into line with the rise of the Antichrist, and I think it's very near. So you have, like I said, so when you look at those nations, you have in play, perfectly fitting the players in play for the Gog-Magog alliance, Ezekiel 38, 39 war. You have in place the nation states for it. You have Israel in a place where you see the instability happening around the world. You have China fulfilling the kings of the East, are prepared to fill the kings of the East prophecy in a position, not only, mentally where they are, but economically and in population, they can do it. I mean, you think about it. I mean, these prophecy, all these, if they didn't have the population to fulfill that army, then they obviously wouldn't fit it. But the fact that they can kill 1/3 of all mankind means they have to have a massive army to be able to do something like that. I mean, and they fit all those things right now. At the same time, you have these other events happening. So that brings us to the United States, obviously. The United States, I think, at some point people criticize Trump for, and I'm not being political, like I said, but for pulling out of the Middle East. I say it's inevitable that someone was going to pull out of the Middle East. If it wasn't him, it would have been somebody else, because you can't retain a force thousands of miles away forever. At some point, you're going to have to pull them out. And that retraction had to occur at some point, especially when you're, trillions and trillions of dollars in debt, which is that perfect storm I was talking about. America just so happens to be at that perfect storm where they've allowed themselves to become so indebted, and at the same time they built up this monster, this dragon called China, who has risen up at the perfect time in history through their crazy ideal of globalization and global trade. They allow for them to build up while they go massively in debt. They have to have a retraction, which just perfectly opens up a vacuum for these players that we see happening right now to fulfill the Gog-Magog alliance. Not only that, you have what is perfectly fitting inside of Israel and the coalition that you have between America and Israel. But even Israel, you see many Christians in America who are supporting them. And what you see as a rise of is this movement in Israel to rebuild their temple. Perfectly fits another prophecy. The temple will be rebuilt. I think it's very near. They've trained a priesthood. They've reestablished a Sanhedrin. They've they've got the red heifer, or they announced that they had the red heifer. The Temple Mount Institute did. They trained certain priests in their school of priests. They have their own school. They've dedicated an altar already. They've sacrificed for, I think, couple years in a row at least, where they've already sacrificing right at the Temple Mount area. The gates are near it, the wall. Passover lambs. They are basically they've reconstituted all the artifacts. I mean, they're prepared to rebuild the temple. They have the Sanhedrin. They've nominated a high priest. They've done everything you could possibly do except actually build the temple. And they've even dedicated the cornerstones. Most people don't know that, but they have. And not only that, the findings just within the last few years that's been happening over in the city of David is amazing. You get a chance to look at that on YouTube. You can just type in City of David. They got their own channel. Look at all the stuff that they found there. It would not shock me if there's an announcement that the City of David, north side of the City of David, is where they announced that, hey, we found where the the temple truly needs to be built, and it's right there in the north side of the City of David, just south of the what we call the Temple Mount area. That could very well happen. I'm not saying that is going to happen, but that could very well happen, and it could happen really quickly. And then there would be really nothing to stop Israel from building that the temple very quickly. You would see a massive movement to make that happen in a lot of ways. Although Israel in many ways is secular, but you do have an increasing amount of people, Jews, that are reaching back and finding themselves not satisfied with their secular life and thinking that, okay, well, I was going to have a secular life and that's not fulfilling. They have success economically, other things, and then they look for something else and avoid, going to Israel and establishing and doing Aliyah and all this stuff. They still fill this void. Well, I think that's what's pushing them, more and more Jews, to now start to reach into their Jewish faith and roots and really try to reconstitute that Temple Mount. Has now become an increasing amount of Jews are following that historic faith, as it were. How do I know that? Because the amount of Jews going to the Temple Mount has dramatically increased. I mean, if you get a chance to look at that, its unbelievable number has changed, where it was like very few even showed any interest in it. Now it's changed, where it's dramatically changed, where you have thousands and thousands of Jews going to the Temple Mount every single day, or all the time, not every day, but all the time. So on a yearly basis. And it's increasing exponentially, so very, very quickly, which tells you that there's a change spiritually happening in Israel, which again perfectly fits that prophetic scenario for the return of Jesus Christ. So if we look at the change that's happening in Israel, spiritually, economically, they're in a position now to export oil and gas and so forth. They're at conflict with Turkey. Turkey's blocking off that with that economic zone they declared. Don't forget that. That's a very important one. I mean, they basically said, hey, no, Greece wants it. Europe wants it. It takes the power away from Putin, who can manipulate Europe with his gas, and that's how he gets a lot of his economy. A large percentage of his economy comes from selling natural resources and gas to Europe. Israel can reach into all those places with that pipeline. They can go into all those places that, people would rather buy from Israel than they would from Turkey. They don't like giving money to somebody who they believe is rogue and unstable and a threat to them. They would much rather buy natural gas for somebody who they feel is more stable and less likely to be a danger to them as a society. Same thing if they have a choice between buying natural gas and oil from Russia or from Israel, they would probably buy it from Israel, or at least a percentage of it. And if you start cutting off, 30% of your sales, when 60% of your economy or thereabouts of Russia's economy suddenly gets cut off, you can see the writing on the wall, and that's what makes it so dangerous, and that's why it makes this perfect firestorm that is preparing to happen if we're paying attention. And with all this strangeness in the air, that may be the title right there, strangeness in the air. With all the strangeness in the air happening around us, that's prophetically laying the foundation for what we've been talking about, Christians have been talking about for centuries, and that is that you have these mass amount of players happening all at once. The possibility of fulfillment of the destruction of certain nation states and so forth. Egypt that we talks about in Ezekiel, the Gog Magog war, the rise of the Antichrist, the rise of China, emerging as an end times player and danger, global danger that destroys 1/3 of mankind. You have retraction of America. You have European Union. How that's going to play out? Is that the revived Roman Empire, or is America part of that? Hard to say. Is America that final empire? Hard to say. I mean, some people say it has to be geographically the same Roman Empire. Well, it doesn't have to be. But how that all figures out, we just need to keep our eye on it and wait and see, and don't hold things too tight and say it has to be like this. We need to have the flexibility to realize that, God works things out the way He wants it to work, but we need to keep our eye on it, keep focused on it, and see what's happening. But the things we know, we know. The things we are unsure, we're unsure. The things that we don't know, we don't know. And there's no point in making hard and fast prophetic statements or whatever, or teachings on prophecy when some things are, uncertain or not perfectly laid out or clear. So we just need to make sure that the things we know, we know. The things we don't go beyond that. Is a real danger sometimes. So, but the things we do know, the kind of things I'm talking about. So where do I see us going? Well, from America, which is what probably a lot of people who's going to watch this video, or the people that do, not a lot, but the people that do, would be, I think America is already in a depression. I think America, a lot of people haven't seen it yet, but we're quickly going that direction. I mean, like I said, you had a retraction economically around 35%, somewhere in that ballpark. I think over the weekend you have Europe economic retraction somewhere around 40 something percent, 40%. I think the world is quickly going into depression. I think that fits perfectly into the whole biblical prophetic scenario. It's real danger. I mean, yeah, and I know it's scary, but I think by this winter we may see in America, it would not shock me, and this may sound crazy or whatever to people, but I have to be honest with people. How I see things, I could definitely see with all the instability happening, all the riots, all the, turmoil happening socially and everything else. I could see America in some kind of economic collapse, economic depression area, or just economic instability. And then with the social instability tied to that, you could see martial law being declared, limiting of movement to cut down on these, what's going on in the cities and all this stuff. You cut down the movement, these guys can't move from one city to the other and cause chaos. I could see where they basically stop travel and things in America. By this winter, you could see America in some kind of martial law status where you can't just freely travel around. And people are locked into their homes, and you can go out for supplies and stuff, but you got to have a pass or whatever it is. And as crazy as that sounds in America, where you have freedom to go everywhere, that's where we might be in some kind of really strangeness. Like I said, we're into a very strange period of time, and that's what I think the groundwork is laid for this end times events to occur. And I think the Gog war is very near. I think you may see Egypt and Turkey get in some kind of conflict with Turkey or Egypt losing that war. And if Turkey wins that, all bets are off, because I think that would embolden Erdogan to believe, hey, I can go in and take the oil fields and gas oil fields of Israel. It's not theirs anyway. That's our land. They've stolen it, which he says all the time. And he sees himself as this new Ottoman ruler, as it were, the leader of the Ummah, as it were, leader of the Islamic nation, world, and you can see him boldly try to encourage these other nation states in Russia to come into Israel, which would be a disaster, but it'd be fit perfectly with Ezekiel 38-39. Those are the kind of things I see happening in the short term and possibly long term. Obviously, we see the rapture, I think, is going to be very near. I think the revealing of the Antichrist will be very near, probably right after the Gog-Magog war. And then slightly after the revealing of the Antichrist, I believe the rapture is going to occur. Slightly thereafter that, I believe the tribulation will begin, because he has to be on the scene to confirm a covenant for 7 years. So he's going to be revealed. I think Christians will know it, will announce it, will tell everybody, but who will listen? And then I think we'll be out of here. That's my take on it. Some people may disagree with that, but that's definitely how I see it. And I've done some videos on it. You can watch them. I'll give you a little more detail on those, and I plan on doing some in the future. But I'll try to do some more of these. But anyway, God bless. Be safe. Keep looking up. Time's short. Share the gospel with everybody around you. Show some love to everybody, and most of all, be in the Word. Trust God's promises and His ability to care for you. Anyway, if I don't see you in this world, see you in the kingdom come. God bless.